السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We explained that Iḍṭirāb mostly takes place in the chain, but there are those rare occasions when it takes place in the text as well. So Ibn Hajar says لكن قل أن يحكم المحدث على الحديث باضطراب بالنسبة إلى اختلاف في المتن دون الإسناد. It is very seldom that you will find muhaddithun mentioning that there is اضطراب in the text without showing how there is اضطراب in the chain. So this statement, the sentence of Ibn Hajar rahmallah, could be understood in two ways. The first is that in almost every occasion when there is a distortion or a mix-up of words in the text, then scholars of hadith will very easily be able to identify a point in the chain, and they would pinpoint the error of one of the narrators. So all they need to do is they simply need to go into the chain and see where the narration splits into two. So starting from the Sahabi, it goes down as one tabi'i, and then he has one student, and now it's two students, and each of these two students are narrating it differently. So they can see, okay, until here, until the teacher, it was fine, but from there, his students are narrating it differently, and therefore they would say, so even though it's the text which is being quoted differently, but they would say that the Iḍṭirāb is in the sanad. So they won't use, they won't attribute the Iḍṭirāb to the chain, to the matan. They will rather attribute it to the chain. So this is the one way to understand the sentence. that قل أن يحكم المحدث على الحديث باضطراب بالنسبة إلى اختلاف في المتن دون الإسناد. So اضطراب in a text, it can only happen when the human narrators differ. The text has to be transmitted from a narrator, isn't? So if it is one narrator or even many narrators and they are all narrating it in the same way, then it is fine. But if there is one narrator who is quoting the same chain and is quoting the text, but is quoting it in a certain way, and then there is another narrator who's quoting the exact one hadith, but in the text he is quoting it in a completely different and contradicting way, then one of those two made a mistake. So remember the important clause here, that both are narrating it in an absolutely contradictory way. اختلافا لا يمكن معه الجمع من غير مرجح. Likewise, we quoted from Sheikh Wajiuddin al-Gujarati that he said, وَمَرَّةً عَلَى وَجْهٍ آخر مُخَالِفٌ له. So it's going with exactly one chain, but they are narrating the matan in two totally different ways. So now we don't know which narrator is making the mistake, which one is narrating it correctly, the text. So scholars will say that there is iḍṭirāb in the sanad rather than saying there is iḍṭirāb in the text. Because bear in mind here that we are talking of one narration, so one text with one sanad, but some students below are narrating it in one way and others are narrating it in a very contradictory way. So this is very different from Mukhtaliful Hadith, which we done long time ago, because there it was two different narrations. So you had one, maybe it even went through different Sahabis, so completely different sanads, two completely different narrations, and therefore it was easy for scholars to identify there when one was nasikh and the other was mansukh, because it's different statements, different incidents, it happened at different times, and therefore they could give tarjih in that way. They could say that this year happened in the 7th year of Hijri, this year took place in the 3rd year of Hijri, for example. So they were able to give tarjih. But here there is no option of saying that the one is nasikh and the other is mansukh, because both are referring to exactly one statement of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So do you understand the difference? But yes, the possibility of jama' is still there. So like how we explained in the previous lesson, that there will be others who try to harmonize the two, they try to combine the two, they try to show that there is actually no contradiction. And in this way, some scholars reconcile it, and they felt then that there was no iḍṭirāb. So that already diminishes the amount of mustarib narrations, the amount of iḍṭirāb you're going to have in the text. Then, since it is the narrators who are transmitting the text, scholars would refer to them when outlining the defect. So that already now diminishes the amount of narrations which will be called or graded as mustarib. It makes them even less. So this is the one way to understand it. That when they're going to see who is, they're going to look for the problem in the sanad and attribute the Iḍṭirāb in the sanad. That's the one way to understand the sentence. Another way to understand this is that Ibn Hajar rahmallah is specifically speaking about the grade mustarib, that you're not going to find scholars, muhaddithun, calling it mustarib. So now the meaning of the sentence will mean that scholars of hadith, they could very easily identify Iḍṭirāb in the chain, and therefore you will find that scholars of hadith, muhaddithun, they very frequently they would claim that there's Iḍṭirāb in the chain. But that was their focus, and that was their domain. They only were able to inspect the sanad and the chain. So it is very rare that you will find them inspecting the matan and inspecting the text and then saying that it is mustarib. So this is the meaning which Allama Qasim rahmallah took, and when he explained, he said, لأن ذلك وظيفة المجتهد في الحكم. It's the mujtahid's duty to inspect the text. So the muhaddith, his duty is just to tell us whether the sanad is authentic or not. That's, and his duty stops there. Now it is the duty of the mujtahid to tell us whether there is iḍṭirāb in the text or not. So the muhaddith's responsibility stops after the sanad, and then he ends it over now to a higher department, and that is the mujtahidun. They are the ones who will then scrutinize the text and inform us whether there are defects in the text or not. So now this here is the next way of understanding the statement. It means that the muhaddithun, they were not qualified enough to comment on the text. And that is the reason that قَلَّ يَحْكُمَ الْمُحَدِّث عَلَى الْحَدِيثِ بِاضْطِرَابٍ بِالنِّسْبَةِ, because he didn't even look at the text. So that was not his domain. It was not his place of study. So when you're going to go through the books of a muhaddith, you are not going to find him commenting on that which he did not know. He's not going to comment and say that this narration, there's iḍṭirāb in it because of a contradiction in the text. Now here also you can notice Allama Qasim's choice of words. He did not say that it is the duty of a faqih. He chose the word mujtahid, because identifying defects in the text is beyond the capability of an average faqih. It is like the highest department, and that is the mujtahidun. The most learned. They are the ones who will be able to tell us whether, because you can understand. But what's sensitive? You are dealing with the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, so it's ultra sensitive. You cannot just say that the words of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, na'udhu billah, are contradictory, etc. So therefore, they give it to the mujtahid. Their IQ, their intellect, their mental ability was all greater. The amount of knowledge which they had, so they would be able to tell us. Maybe for us who don't know anything, for us it will seem like there's a contradiction. But they had that extra expertise and that extra skill, and therefore they were the ones who were able to tell us. So taking the second meaning is that لكن قل يحكم المحدث على الحديث باضطراب بالنسبة إلى اختلاف في المتن دون الإسناد. The two meanings are like this here. The first meaning is that even though there might be a contradiction in the words, a muhaddith will never say it's iḍṭirāb in the matan. Very seldom he'll do that. He will mostly say it's iḍṭirāb in the sanad. That's the first way of understanding it. The second way of understanding this here is that a muhaddith won't tell us there's iḍṭirāb in the matan. Why? Because he doesn't even inspect the matan. It's not his field, it is the mujtahid's field. So if you want to know whether there's iḍṭirāb in the matan, you need to go to the statements of the mujtahidun. So you need to see what they have said. And obviously, it wasn't only the four imams. At that time, there were many mujtahidun. But now Mullah al-Qari objected on the statement of Allama Qasim rahmallah, and he said, وَفِي أَنَّ الْمُحَدِّث مِنْ جُمْلَةِ الْمُجْتَهِدِينَ. He's saying that muhaddithun were also mujtahidun. بل ربما يعتمد بعض المجتهدين على حكم المحدث في الحديث بالصحة وعدمها. So he mentions, but in fact, sometimes the mujtahidun would refer to the muhaddithun. So this objection of Sheikh Mullah al-Qari is absolutely out of place. Just to see how out of place it is, you can go read Asrul Hadith Sharif of Sheikh Muhammad Awama, that definitely not every muhaddith was a mujtahid. In fact, the vast majority of muhaddithun were not mujtahidun, and therefore the vast majority of them were actually muqallidun. And yes, muhaddithun would refer to muhaddithin. Mujtahid would refer to muhaddithin. Imam Shafi'i rahimahullah, he mentions that for ilal, he would refer to the muhaddithun. But that was for aspects regarding to the sanad. So the mujtahid would refer to the muhaddith. It was not with regards to the text. For the text, the muhaddithun had to refer to the mujtahidun. And hence, you know, the famous statement, نحن الصيادلة وأنتم الأطباء. It's this objection of Mullah al-Qari is absolutely out of place. Hence, Alam al-Qani rahmallah explained that وإيضاحه أن الفحص عن أحكام المتون وظيفة المجتهدين وهم قليل بخلاف الأسانيد. That those who can tell us whether there is Iḍṭirāb in the matn, it is the duty of the mujtahidun, and the mujtahidun themselves were little, and therefore you will find very few instances. Obviously, there has to be a problem in the sanad for there to be an absolute contradiction in the text, because Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam ma yantiqu anil hawa. Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, all his words were divinely inspired. So definitely it can't be that the contradiction is from Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's going to be from a link below. So muhaddithun, they are going to identify that link below, and they're going to attribute the Iḍṭirāb to the sanad. The mujtahidun, they don't know much about the sanad because they now inspecting on the hadith. So therefore, they're just going to look at the and they're going to tell you that there's Iḍṭirāb in this matan. But now when you take that matan, which they said that there is Iḍṭirāb in, and you go and you inspect it and you look at it and you scrutinize it, you will find that yes, there is a problem in the link. So the mujtahidun, they would inspect the text and rule whether there is Iḍṭirāb or not. But again, yeah, every mujtahid inspected it with the lenses of his usul. And that then caused a difference in the ruling, and that which then caused was one of the contributing factors towards the ikhtilaf in the madhahib. So until here it is understood that Iḍṭirāb is a defect which causes us to dismiss the narration. But now Ibn Hajar rahmallah explained instances when Iḍṭirāb takes place intentionally, and we can still accept the narration. It does not cause any impact on the integrity, and it does not cause any impact on the retentive skills of the narrator. So he says, وقد يقع الإبدال عمدا لمن يراد اختبار حفظه امتحانا من فاعله. That sometimes they would distort whether the sanad or the matan, just so that they could test another person. They wanted to see if he remembered the hadith correctly or not. So in order to test him, they would swap around narrators. And today, you know, it's becoming now, it's gaining more prominence within the Arab world, where they're having official institutes where you go and you study hadith. And they do it on the same in the same way like how you study Quran, how you do hifz of Quran, where you take sabak and you go with your daughter, etc. So in the same way, they have like that institutes where you go, you study under a teacher, you memorize, and then you do daughter, etc. So in until today, they use this method that when they're doing the imtihan, they swap around a lot, and that's how they test. You know, Sheikh Nuruddin rahmallah, he had where he used to teach girls Riyadh al-Salihin. So there are many females who memorize the whole Riyadh al-Salihin under Sheikh Nuruddin. So this is when they would have imtihan, then this is how they would have the imtihan, that they would swap around, and then they would have to correct. It's like one section of the imtihan was like that. So until today, this year takes place. So this year is now an example which others have showed as an example for maqloob. Ulama Ibn Salah, rahimahullah, etc. They all mentioned this year under the chapter of maqloob, where you're swapping around and mixing up the narration. And Mullah al-Qari also admits that it's actually closer to maqloob. جعله المصنف من أقسام الإبدال وإن جعله غيره من أقسام القلب لقلة مناسبته بالقلب So he says, وَالْأَظْهَرُ عِنْدِي أَنَّ مُنَاسَبَتَهُ بِالْقَلْبِ أَقْوَى. So this is what he's saying. He's saying that it's actually, this here is closer to maqlub rather than istirab. So although Ibn Hajar rahimahullah is mentioning it here, but Ibn Hajar amended his definition. So according to his new definition, which he mentioned and which he did not very clearly explain, he decided to bring this here under the chapter of Iḍṭirāb. And he gives examples of how this took place. He says, Kama waqa'a al-Bukhari, like how it took place for Imam Bukhari. So this here is the very famous incident which Ibn Adi rahimahullah transmits from his shuyukh, who were the students of Imam Bukhari rahimahullah, that when Imam Bukhari went to Baghdad, then the scholars of Hadith in Baghdad heard that this muhaddith is coming. فَاجْتَمَعُوا وَعَمَدُوا إِلَى مِئَةِ حَدِيثٍ. They then took 100 narrations, فَقَلَّبُوا مُتُونَهَا وَأَسَانِيدَهَا. They swapped around the text in those narrations. They even changed around the narrators. وَجَعَلُوا مَتْنَ هَذَا الْإِسْنَادِ لِأَسْنَادٍ آخَرٍ. This is what they done. They took the text of one narration and put it with another narration, etc. Then they chose 10 people and they gave each of these 10 people 10 narrations. So 10 times 10 is 100. And they told them that now you go to Imam Bukhari rahmallah and you're going to have to test him. So فَلَمَّا حَضَرُوا وَطْمَأَنَّ الْمَجْلِسُ بِأَهْلِهِ الْبَغْدَادِيِّينَ. When everyone was seated down and now this whole majlis is full of what people, what all these Baghdadi people. And then woman انضم إليهم من الغرباء من أهل خراسان وغيرهم, and also those who are traveling. So you can imagine the hall is filled to capacity. The first one comes and then he says that do you know this hadith? So Imam Bukhari rahmallah says لا أعرفه. So those in the audience who didn't know what was happening and they weren't very skilled in hadith, they were shocked how Imam Bukhari doesn't know. He's claiming to be a muhaddith. Then the second, he mentioned hadith like this. But each one, Imam Bukhari is saying, I don't know it. So the people, those who don't know, are becoming shocked. Like, look at this guy. He's saying that he's a muhaddith, but none of these ahadith he knows. Second person come with his 10. Imam Bukhari is saying, la a'rifuhu, la a'rifuhu, la a'rifuhu. Again, but وكان الفقهاء ممن حضر يلتفت بعضهم إلى بعض ويقولون فهم الرجل. So those who didn't know, they were thinking that Imam Bukhari, how he doesn't know nothing. But those who knew what was happening, they said, hey, look, Imam Bukhari, rahmallah, he actually, he knows his stuff. Then after they all mentioned their 100, the 10 person mentioned his 10, so now all 100 narrations were mentioned. Imam Bukhari, rahmallah, now, فَلَمَّا فَهِمَ الْبُخَارِ مِنْ قَرِينَةِ الْحَالِ انتهاء مِنْ مَسْأَلَتِهِمْ. So Imam Bukhari didn't even ask them, are you guys finished? Are you guys done? You want to test me some more? He let them carry on. Second guy came, third guy came, fourth guy. He didn't know how many guys are going to come and how many people are going to test him. He allowed however many want to come test me, they are most free, they are most welcome. When he understood that, okay, now they are finished, التفت إلى السائل الأول, then he turned to the first person and he said, you asked me about this narration. You quoted it in this way. Imam Bukhari then quoted it how that person quoted it. And then Imam Bukhari said, but it's actually correct like this. Now, in the mutashabihat in the Quran, that when you see similar words and how it becomes so difficult to remember. Here Imam Bukhari, rahmallah, firstly memorized the incorrect way. So it's like a mutashabihat because now it's changing around. And so he quoted it, he only heard it once. And he quoted the incorrect way. So that is why Alama Iraqi rahmallah commonly, very often he would say that Ibn Hajar says, سمعت شيخنا غير مرة يقول. I heard our Sheikh Alama Iraqi rahmallah saying many times that when you hear this incident, ما العجب من معرفة البخاري بالخطأ من الصواب في الأحاديث لاتساع معرفته. That there is no astonishment. It's not surprising that Imam Bukhari rahmallah knew that these narrations were incorrect and he could and he knew the correct because everybody knows the status of Imam Bukhari. But then he says, وَإِنَّمَا يُتَعَجَّبُ مِنْهُ فِي هَذَا لِكَوْنِهِ حَفِظَ مُوَالَاةِ الْأَحَادِيثِ عَلَى الْخَطَإِ مِنْ مَرَّةٍ وَاحِدَةٍ. That the more astonishing thing of this incident is that how Imam Bukhari rahmallah He's hearing, they are just shooting the ahadith one after the other. And Imam Bukhari is hearing it once, and it's like mutashabihat, it's very similar. Yet Imam Bukhari rahmallah remembered those incorrect narrations, even though he heard them once. So that's the first incident which Ibn Hajar rahmallah is mentioning here. Then after that he says, well, Uqayli. Likewise, the same thing happened for Alama Uqayli. So Alama Uqayli, students used to go to him, and he wouldn't take out his notes. He would just sit there, and then he would say, you guys take out your kitab, and you start to read. So now some new students, they came there and they said, "Oh, you must, this teacher here, he doesn't take out any of his books. So imma yakuna min ahfadin nas or min akdhabihim. Either he is min ahfadin nas, he is the most, he has the best memory, or min akdhabihim, or maybe he's the greatest liar that he's acting like he knows so much." So ثم عمدنا إلى كتابة أحاديث من روايتي. So then they said, okay, let's test him, because now we need to know whether we should still go to his majlis or not. So they decided, okay, we're going to take out ahadith which he narrated to us, and we'll change around few words, put some words here, change the order of the words, likewise add new words, and also so amend it totally. So the next day when we went now, so Alama Uqayli, as his normal practice, he's sitting there, no book in front of him, and he just said, Iqra, okay, come read. So the first student said, he started to read. The minute he came to the portion which was distorted, immediately Alama Uqayli took the kitab and he marked it incorrect and he corrected it. Then the second person came and he done the same thing. Imam Alama Uqayli rahmallah corrected all the what they distorted. So وَعَلِمْنَا أَنَّهُ مِنْ أَحْفَظِ النَّاسِ. They said that from there we learned that he was actually the most knowledgeable, because he was able to detect the errors from memory. So Alama Ibn Hajar then says, وَغَيْرِهِمَا. This year also happened to numerous others, like I told you, right up until today it takes place. Another way which Alama Ibn Kathir rahmallah mentions, in he says that Ibn Abdul Hadi, he came to Alama Mizzi rahimahullah, and he said that I chose 40 narrations of yours. I want to read it to you so that I can get Ijāzah from you. So he began to read the first narration. So Alama Mizzi rahmallah, he was relaxing, he was lying down. But when that person started to read, immediately Alama Mizzi, when he came to the portion which he distorted, which is mentioning incorrectly, Alama Mizzi set up. And then when he came to the second, now Alama Mizzi was sharp, so he caught up. So tabassama, and he said, "Ma huwa ana dhakal Bukhari." See, you don't test me like this here. Those tests are for Imam Bukhari. He passed those kind of tests with flying colors. It's not me. You don't test me like that. But the point is, you can see he do it also from memory. That's how he knew that this person is quoting it incorrectly. So this was the mechanism which they would use to determine the status of the narrator's memory. Likewise, another instance which Alama Sakhawi rahmallah mentions in Fathul Mughith, he says that Hibatullah ibn al-Mubarak, he says that once I gathered with the Amir Abu Nasr ibn Makula, so he said, "Khudh juz'aini min al-hadith." He said that, why don't you test me? You take you take all my ahadith, swap it around, and I will solve them for you. So you can see, like, purposefully he done it. But although this year would take place at many times, there was debate on whether it is permissible or not. So therefore you find here, Alama Radiyuddin ibn al-Hanbali rahmallah, he mentions that هذا على القول بجواز هذا الإبدال. That this all this here takes place according to those who believe that it's permissible to distort a narration like this. والظاهر كما قال كمال ibn Abi Sharif عدم الجواز. He's saying, but more apparent, like Alama Kamal ibn Abi Sharif says, that it's not permissible to do this, even if it is for testing. And he says, وَعَلَيْهِ الْكَمَالُ الشُّمُنِّ. He says, likewise, this is what happened with Alama Kamal al-Shumuni. He's also of this view that it's not permissible. And in the lessons of Muqaddama ibn Salah, which lesson was it? Lesson 170. We did mention there how some scholars would become so angry when they were tested. Remember Muhammad ibn Ajlan, he cursed those who tried to test him, and his curses were accepted. Likewise, the teacher of Imam Bukhari rahmallah, Fazl ibn Dukain, he kicked Yahya ibn Ma'in in his chest, and Yahya ibn Ma'in fell off the veranda. So in those times they could do things like that. Yahya ibn Ma'in couldn't go and open a case of assault against him. Imagine if a teacher in today's time has to kick a student, not even in a chest, just kick a student. But even if Yahya ibn Ma'in could, he would not go and open a case of assault. When he left the house, he went into the house. So before going, Imam Yahya ibn Ma'in said, I'm going to test Fazl bin Dukain today. So Imam Ahmad told him, no, don't do it. So they went there, they're sitting on the veranda, and Fazl bin Dukain caught up that Yahya ibn Ma'in is testing him, so he kicked him and he fell off. So when they left the house, Imam Ahmad is telling him, Alam aqul laka, did I not tell you that there's no need for you to test him? Whatever he's saying is correct. So Yahya ibn Ma'in replied, Wallah, la rafsatuhu ahabbu ilayya min sufarati, that I prefer that kick more than anything else. So obviously Fazl bin Dukain done that because maybe he was of the view that it's not even permissible. But Ibn Hajar rahmallah chose the view that it is permissible, but he mentions one clause here. وَشَرْطُهُ أَلَّا يَسْتَمِرَّ عَلَيْهِ. The condition is that they should not persist on it. That it is essential that once the test is over, then the narration should be stated correctly. Why? لئلا يظن أنه ورد كذلك عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. No one should ever think that it has been transmitted like that from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It should be clarified, and the audience should know that how we have done it is incorrect, and this is the correct way. So it is permissible out of necessity, and it is restricted to that necessity. بل ينتهي بانتهاء الحاجة. So if it is done intentionally in that way, then it does not affect the authenticity of the narration, and nor does it have any impact on the narrator. You can't say now Yahya ibn Ma'in, because he swapped it around, so now he's weak, or Ibn Abdul Hadi. In fact, Shu'bah would do this here so often. So you cannot say it doesn't have any impact on their integrity. But then there are times when it is done intentionally, but it's done for ulterior motives. So because the reason then is invalid, it causes the narration to lose its value. فلو وقع الإبدال عمدا لا لمصلحة بل للإغراب مثلا. So if it takes place intentionally and there's no valid reason, so there's no valid Shari'i reason, but maybe a person just wanted to become famous. He wanted to be such that he has the narration and nobody else has it. You know, this year was such a big sickness. So there were so many people who were actually known to do this year. In Fathul Mughith, we quoted actually quite a few from النكت of Imam Zarkashi. وممن كان يفعل بهذا المقصر على سبيل الكذب حماد بن عمرو النصيبي أحد المذكورين بالوضع كما وقع له. So you see that he would do this year very frequently, just so that he could be such that he's the only one who has the narration and no one else has the narration. So if a person is to do it like that, فهو من أقسام الموضوع. If a person intentionally swaps a narrator or intentionally distorts the narration and is only doing it for some ulterior motive, then the narration is considered as mawdu'. But if there is a very shari'i reason, then it is fine and it will not be considered as mawdu'. فلو وقع غلطا فهو من المقلوب أو المعلل. If it really does take place by mistake, then it will fall under the category of maqlub or mu'allal. So again, here you can see how all of these terminologies blend in, and sometimes they are used interchangeably. We did explain this. Ibn Salam mentioned all these here under maqlub. Ibn Hajar rahmallah is mentioning it under mustarib. In fact, under the chapter of maqlub, Ibn Salah gave one example, and he mentioned that it's a perfect example for mu'allal. You remember on page 102. ومن أمثلته ويصلح مثالا للمعلل. And then commenting on it, Ibn Hajar rahmallah said, لا يختص بهذا المثال بل كل مقلوب لا يخرج عن كونه معللا أو شاذا. Every maqlub narration, you can either call it mu'allal, some muhaddithun will call it shadh. So if you go back to that previous point of wahm, you will find that there is not much differences, and therefore Iḍṭirāb overlaps with mu'allal. So mu'allal in Mustarib alik one in the same. And therefore, Ulama al-Qani says, وَهُوَ نَوْعٌ مِنَ الْمُعَلَّل, that Iḍṭirāb is a part of Mu'allal. Likewise, Ulama Sakhawi, rahmallah, when he's giving references where you can find narrations in which there is Iḍṭirāb, he says, go look in the books of Ilal, because Mustarib and Mu'allal is the same thing. And so since Iḍṭirāb is used in the meaning of Mu'allal and even in the meaning of Shadh, you will find in the beginning, from what you understood in the beginning of this chapter, is that when a narration is used as is classified as Mustarib, then that narration and its parallel narration, so that narration and the other narration both will be rejected, because you can't give preference to one over the other. But you will find, since it's being used in the meaning of Shadh, so the opposite of Shadh is Mahfud. It reminds me of the example in Tamheed. There, Alama Ibn Abdul Barr rahmallah, he said, La a'lamu, you know that hadith of Zul Yadayn, Alama Zahawi rahmallah, Alama Ibn Shihab al-Zuhri rahmallah, he referred to it as Dhushimalayn. And many in the text also, he said that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam made 2 rukus, etc. So Alama Ibn Abdul Barr rahmallah mentions with regards to Alama Zuhri, he said, لا أعلم أحدا من أهل العلم من أهل لا أعلم أحدا من أهل العلم والحديث المنصفين فيه عول على حديث ابن شهاب في قصة ذي اليدين لاضطرابه فيه وأنه لم يتم له إسنادا ولا متنا وإن كان إماما عظيما في هذا الشأن. Obviously, you know, Imam Zuhri rahmallah was, but yet he made a mistake. So they're rejecting this narration, and he's saying there is Iḍṭirāb in this narration, but you're preferring the other narrations. So at times it's also used when there's no Iḍṭirāb at all. So there's no mukhalafa at all. So the word Iḍṭirāb is used when there's no mukhalafa between 2 narrations. So there are times when it's also used just to show minimal weakness, that they would use the word Iḍṭirāb in the meaning of da'if. And this is the point which Shaykh Ibrahim al-Lahim said, that يرد في كلام النقاد وصف الإسناد بالاضطراب ولا اختلاف فيه أصلا يوجب هذا في كلام أبي حاتم الرازي وغيره فمقصودهم بهذا الحكم عليه بالضعف ووجود خلل فيه وأنه غير مستقيم. So the word مضطرب and the word اضطراب is also used for general weak narrations. Inshallah, we'll continue from here. جزاكم الله خيرا. السلام عليكم.